You are listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with Rob Reed and Josh Galicki, bringing together the love of nature and photography.
Welcome to episode 43. Should you be literal or should you be creative? Rob, good to be with you.
Happy New Year. Josh. Happy New Year to you too. How's it going?
Going well. I've been shooting a lot. It's actually been a pretty productive winter so far, so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, what's coming in? Sort of water birds and stuff like that, I guess.
Yeah, lots of ducks, lots of owls. I've had some very good success with owls recently too, which I don't typically have success with owls, but I've been lucky so far. And standard stuff, great blue herons, bald eagles, harriers, some raptors here and there. So it's been a very productive winter so far.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, I went to, funnily enough, people won't be surprised, I went to Wales, a place I like to go over Christmas, and sort of, we came back just for the new year. And yeah, I ended up shooting all sorts of stuff, actually, not birds, funnily enough. I ended up doing sort of beachscapes, those sort of intimate little scenes on the beach, where you get seaweed and the nice patterns they make, and shells and barnacles and what else? Oh, and I came across these what are called sand mason worms, where they create this like tube. They stick all the grains of sand and broken shell together, and they make a tube which they occupy underneath the sand. But there's only like a centimeter or two that sticks out above the surface of the sand, and most of them sort of fall over and lie flat, but some of them stick up. And when you get them nicely backlit with a macro lens, it's just, I had real good fun with that, actually. So yeah,
I remember you showing me the images. They're really cool. Yeah. I didn't know what I was even looking at first. I'd never seen that. Yeah, really interesting. Like sea glass, natural sea glass.
yeah, exactly that. Yeah, so it's like with backlighting, it's almost like that sea glass stuff. It was just such a, I don't know. It was just, I always like to find new stuff, and it was just fascinating. And I spent hours doing that, getting soaking wet and getting the camera covered in sand and salt and all the things you shouldn't do, I guess. But it makes you feel
like you work for the shot and you're being out there. It makes you feel alive.
Exactly. And yeah, it was something different. Something different to photograph, which I always enjoy. I haven't done much photography since the start of the new year. I've got a lot of personal stuff going on, but I'm looking forward to getting back into it, in a few days' time, and getting out with a camera. But I think I really enjoyed just doing some different abstract stuff. I said some of the patterns the seaweed makes, it's just I just find it fascinating. So yeah.
And this plays into the subject of the podcast, talking about that pressure to be innovative, or just having a feeling of, I want to do something different today, versus finding and getting a great literal shot. This topic was submitted, this was a little while back. I think you remember this, Rob. We were collecting suggestions from the listening audience, and this was a suggestion. And I just think it's a really great discussion. I've actually, this has happened to me just recently over the past 2 weeks. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, because it is. I mean, I like to have literal shots. I still do. But what really gets me going is pushing myself creatively and coming up with something different and something I've never seen before. That's what pushes my buttons. But particularly if you're in a situation and you've got something you've never photographed before, or you're in a location that you've never photographed before, I guess there's always that temptation to do the literal stuff first. I guess that's kind of where you're heading with your example, is it?
Yeah, matter of fact, I'll give an example that happened yesterday. So myself and Scott Warner, a good friend of mine, and we've been shooting a lot. He lives not far from me here on the Eastern Shore, Rob. He listens to the podcast. We met because of the podcast, as a matter of fact. And so we went out. It was kind of a cold, rainy, kind of crappy winter morning yesterday. So we went down to a place called Blackwater Wildlife Refuge. It's this huge refuge on the Eastern Shore. It's mostly tidal marsh. There's a wildlife drive and the like, but it's a great spot to shoot in the winter because you get waterfall. There's raptors and owls. So we went down to this road on the refuge, and it's very, very popular for short-eared owls. In the evening on weekends, you'll see 20, 30 cars lined up and everybody's trying to photograph these owls. It's a difficult situation because everybody gets out of their car, they set up their tripods, and the owls they don't typically fly near them, right? They kind of fly around them because you have this huge crowd of people and everybody's chatting. I mean, it's a communal thing, but the locals are not fans of it, right? So you have a lot of watermen and folks who live not far from there, and they're like, get off the road, so there's a lot of that going on. So there's a little bit of tension. I don't like crowds in this particular area, and Scott doesn't either. So we went down early in the morning. Most people go in the evening for the owls, but we decided to try it. We were the only car on this road. We were going really slow, and we made 1 or 2 passes on the road. And I would say 25 yards out, there was a beautiful short-eared owl just perched on a piece of wood.
Oh, God.
And we pulled the Jeep over nice and slow, rolled down the window, and we were just shooting it. It was just absolutely fun thing to shoot because, one, it's a short-eared owl, and it was looking at us. It wasn't disturbed by us. It looked at us, but those eyes, I mean, the detail on these birds, I mean, they're stunning, right?
They are stunning birds. Yeah. Yeah.
So 600 millimeter out the window, getting some frame filling shots. And it was a lot of fun because you don't come across that. And I'm sure a lot of people are listening to, you've been inundated your social media feeds with short-eared owls in flight. Most of the shots that we see, especially in the States, it's shorties flying and flying. Rarely do you see the perch shot, actually. So we were actually looking for a perch shot. So it was great.
Yeah,
so
because when they're not flying, generally they're on the ground.
Yeah, that's right. And the only time you can get them on the ground or where they're perched in the grasses, there's in this next to this road, it's all salt marsh. It's excessive these salt marsh flats, and it's all these. It's a rush grass. It's a type of marsh grass. So the only time you can find them in there is when they're flying and they dive down into it, right? Because they're there. Picking them, because they match perfectly. It's almost impossible.
Their plumage is pretty cryptic. Yeah,
it's amazingly so. Yeah. And this bird was perched up, right? So he was easy to find, and we spent some time. So then the obligatory high five. Wow, that was awesome, and we moved on. Really happy we got that shot. Was it artistic? Absolutely not. But was it fun to shoot and the experience? 100%, right? So got that shot. And then, you almost feel like you won the day when you have an experience like that, especially when it happens first thing. So it puts you in a good mood after that.
Yeah, especially if you had decent light at the time as well.
Yeah, the light was kind of misty and rainy and foggy. So it added a little bit of mood to it.
Yeah.
And after that, we continued on the wildlife drive, and we came across this great blue heron. And there's great blue herons all over the place. It's a very standard bird. It's just like your gray herons over there. And it was kind of hunting in this little ditch where there was water. Actually, it was more than a ditch. A bit of a stream, I guess what you would call it. It was like a managed stream in this refuge. But it was right in the middle of I want to say, what kind of tree was it? It was probably a maple tree, I think. But all the leaves were off, and it kind of had this haunted look. And it was right in the middle of this maple tree. So I took a vertical composition where you had the white sky behind it, high key, push my exposure.
Yeah.
And then I had the tree and all the limbs, the water was still. So I put the great blue heron in the center of this vertical composition. We had the tree on top and the reflection of the tree all below. And the way it worked, the tree branches they exited the frame perfectly on each corner of the frame, lower side, upper side, and the water, I rendered that white too with high key, right? So, it looked really, really nice. And this one I'm going to print. I'm really excited about it. Matter of fact, I'll share both of these on social media this week too, so people can see what I'm talking about between the short-eared owl shot and the great blue heron shot. And we were really excited about that because I'm like, this is great. Which shot did I like better? Absolutely the great blue heron shot. It's not even close.
Yeah.
However, the short-eared owl shot was much more fun to shoot. It was just an exciting thing because it's like, oh my God, this is happening. Hopefully the bird doesn't fly. You're trying to get your lens out of the car and you're excited, versus I see a great blue heron, but what can I do with that? Maybe I'll play around, different perspective. You're solving something in the field. It's kind of more your thinking brain is on versus that kind of dopamine rush of coming across something that's interesting. So that I think it's a perfect a perfect analogy
Yeah,
to.
I think so, because I mean, I guess the difference is, you've come across the short-haired owl in a situation which is unusual. So
Yeah,
you've had a unique opportunity almost to take a shot, a literal shot that you have never taken before. So you get excited about that, and so you're not really focused on what can you do with it artistically necessarily. You want to show people how good that experience was. Look at this. Look where we came across
yeah,
this owl. So you're literally representing that scene to that's your intent. Your intent is that. And I wrote an article about intent actually, and it went through the three stages of intent, and and that's the first one. It's that literal, the intention is to show the bird or the subject, whatever you're shooting, as you saw it, in because you want to share that experience with people and go, look how amazing that was.
yeah, absolutely.
Versus when you came across the heron, you're thinking, well, I've shot them in this sort of situation 1,000 times, but I like, or what can I do differently? I like the shapes that those branches form. And if I made it high key, I can remove all the distractions elsewhere, so I can concentrate on shape and form. And if I shoot it vertically, it works with the reflection and this. So you're piecing that piece of art together. So
Yeah.
the intention is different. The intention is not necessarily to show the subject in a literal way. It's to show how artistic you can make that situation, and you're showing shape, form.
Yes, and I shot that great blue heron so many times over the years that it forces you to start thinking critically in terms of how can I make something different.
Yeah.
Also, the circumstances. The short-eared owl was on this wooden perch in this vast open area with marsh grasses. Artistically, I probably couldn't even think of something at that point in time. It essentially called for a literal shot of the bird. And the great blue heron shot, based on where it was with the tree and everything, there was a lot more content around it. So it rendered itself something that could be, turned into something more artistic, like, as you say, form and function and shape.
Yeah, I think it's just assessing those situations when they come along. Did you shoot the shorty a bit wider, or did you just
Yeah,
put
I
it on
used a
600
600
mil?
millimeter on that
Yeah,
actually, and I've shot these birds plenty of times over the years on that road. But normally they're flying, they're distant, they're perched, but they're further out where I'm putting a 1.4 on it. I mean, I had a 600 telephoto, and this bird was almost filling the. There was a little bit of room; it was just right.
yeah.
But rarely do I ever see them perch that close to the road and that close to the car, because they're typically a bit skittish. They'll
Yeah.
fly off. Yeah,
Did
if you.
did you leave it in? It didn't fly off presumably, and you just left it to it in the end. And just
Well, it was hunting actually. So
yeah,
as it was there, we watched it looking down, looking over, and we shot it for maybe. I mean, this is always a problem too. Everybody knows this. When you have a great experience, you're just the shutter is held down and you're taking way too many images. But
yeah,
it's what it is, right? Thank you, memory card, for being 1 terabyte. But you got the shutter held down, and it was hunting, and then it eventually flew off, not because it felt disturbed by us. It just flew off and it started hunting. So it was great.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's just I love those experiences. But as I said, I guess when you come across things like that, the first thought is not how do I shoot this artistically. It's like this is an amazing situation. I want to show this as I saw it.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the
The,
temptation, and there's
the
nothing wrong
difficult
with that,
thing is
right?
rolling that windshield down nice and slow and putting that lens just nice and delicately out the window, because that's really where the point of disturbance is. If they're going to fly off, it's when you're getting your lens set on the side of the
Exactly.
car door. Yeah.
Because I mean, the birds sometimes they don't like things being pointed at them, do they? And
No.
I'm like, you get it, particularly if they're hunted.
That's right. That's right. And the interesting thing about short-eared owls, and I think about this with great horned owls, and again, this is for the North American folks, but it might be the same because you have short-eared owls over in the UK
Yeah, I
too.
haven't seen one yet this year. It's unusual. I've been looking for them, but I haven't seen
Oh,
one.
wow. The eye colors are different. Like here, they're yellow. The short-eared owls, and long hair too. I think they're more orange
Yeah,
over there,
yeah,
from what
yeah, they
probably
are.
different
Yeah,
subspecies. But the short-eared owls that come down in winter in this area, and some actually even breed in the area. It's rare, but they breed. they're really more of they're a bit buffy colored, right? They're more tan. I was with Kurum a couple of weeks ago during the holiday break, and we went up to a place in New York. I think it's called Shangang Grasslands. It's in kind of the Hudson Valley, which from where I'm at, Rob, it's probably another 5.5 hours north. So significantly north. The short-eared owls, it's a much more colder climate up there. Farm fields, they're almost gray, right? Just
Wow.
like great horned owls. They're kind of more buffy and tan beige down south, but as you go further north, they're grayish white. And it's kind of interesting how the morphs change.
Yeah, that is. But presumably there'd be more snow cover, in the
Yeah.
in the winter because of the difference.
They blend in better, depending upon where they're at, which makes sense, I guess. It's
because I mean, the shorties we get here are the buff, very buff colored, because we don't get much snow. Not anymore.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So, but honestly, I haven't seen one. Funnily enough, I went to my parents' house last night, for dinner, and as I drove over Salisbury Plain, I saw a barn owl on the way there, and when I came back later on in the evening, I saw one on the way back. So I had two barn owls. No
That's
camera,
great.
of course. It's just well, taking them at night is difficult anyway when you're driving those long straight roads. But the long straight roads across the plain, you quite often see them, on the fence posts. And they're obviously hunting and on the lookout for prey when we're perched up there. But yeah, I get the rolling the window down gently. Oh God, we've all done that, haven't we? When we come across things on the road, and how many times do they fly off just as you get into position? It's gone.
That's right. There's two critical points. There's getting the lens outside the window, getting stable, and then setting your exposure, right? And the bird can fly off either when the lens is going out the window or the windshield's coming down, or when you're getting your exposure set before you hit the shutter button. It's happened many a time.
I often, in those sort of situations, I will sneak at least get the exposure to the point where I only have to make minor adjustments before I make the major move. Yeah.
This was a bit unique because we weren't even planning on shooting yet. So we didn't even have normally your exposure is dialed in or you're close, right? Where you have to make an adjustment or two. This was turn the power on the camera,
take the lens cap off, which is the other classic mistake. You get into that situation, you go, oh, damn it, I've still got my lens cap on.
Thankfully, I had the 600. I don't even have a cap for that, right? Because it's so big. But my exposure settings were based on whatever I shot last, from the week before or a couple days prior. But thankfully, it didn't move, which was great.
Pretty close, yeah. I just think in those sort of situations, I mean, there's nothing wrong with shooting literal stuff. I mean, and that's the sort of thing that does do well on social media. It just continues to do well on social media. You said it before. I think, if I take a decent literal image, frame filling image of a colorful bird, right, and you put it up on social media, the number of likes you'll get for that generally will be greater than if you've taken an artistic shot of, it can be common or rare, it doesn't really matter, of whatever it is, because I think people understand the literal stuff more. It's instant. We've talked about this before. The instant sugar hit, isn't it? The sugar rush. You understand it. You know what it is. Oh, that's a really good picture of that. It's all sharp. It's the light's nice. The colors are coming across really well. I quite like. Not much sort of compositional. It's not challenging, is it? Compositionally, if you're shooting something, big in
rule of third, boom, right? Or
exactly.
Break the rules if you want, but it's not that challenging.
But I think when you're showing this stuff to other people, they understand it instantly, and that's the literal representation.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're going more artistic, I think you're challenging people more, and I like that. Because you could take that. There are various extremes that you can take that to. So there are various stages of creativity, because you can be creative and you can still render something in a relatively literal fashion. You're talking about the high key, for example.
Yeah, Rob, it's really interesting because it's a spectrum when it comes to what's literal and what's not. The image that I was just telling you about, the great blue heron with the tree, I mean, some people would look at that and say, okay, well, you've incorporated space. There's compositional elements that are incorporated by usage of the tree and shooting a little loose, but it's still literal, right? It's still a great blue heron. It's still a tree. It's the reflection. That's not necessarily artistic. And the reason why I say that is, I mean, I see content creators on Instagram. I follow some, primarily out of Europe, where they create these images, and it's truly digital art. I mean, they're using cheese graters to deflect light to create all these different types of prisms and different things. And so I think, you know, you could say a loose composition that's an environmental portrait is creative or it's innovative, but maybe that's standard when compared to some of the digital art stuff, right? I mean, Jerry Ribicek, like, look what he does when it comes to using intentional camera movement and whatnot. So it's on a spectrum. It just is.
Yeah, exactly. Because there, I mean, when you're talking to that sort of wider in the frame, you know, you've still got that literal element to that. It's just
Yeah.
that, you know, that sort of environmental portrait, if you like, that's the artistic and creative element to it.
Yeah.
But it still starts from a very literal base.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're talking about a lot of the stuff that people like Yuri do, you know, you're getting into the realms of, you know, it's just, you're representing that bird or that subject, you know, in a much more creative way. You know, it's impressionistic rather than literal. So I think with those sorts of shots, though, when you're using things like ICM and that type of thing, the most important thing with it is that the viewer must know what the subject is, even if it's not sharp and you're seeing it in a literal sense. So birds like herons and swans, for example, work really well with that because they have a very distinctive shape and color. And particularly if you're contrasting it quite well against the background, I mean, a white bird, for example, a white shape, you can still get the swan across immediately into the viewer's brain, so that you know you're looking, you know what you're looking at, but nothing's in focus, nothing. It's that real impressionistic feel, and that's taking creativity to the next level.
Yeah. Abstract and some of these things, especially that we've seen in wild art over the years, the abstract category.
Yeah,
I remember some of the stuff was just really amazing what was done in there. So yeah, you can really get creative. It's just a matter of what you're comfortable with. And also, I think you have to deal with the cards that you're being dealt. I mean, let's face it, when you're photographing anything out in the wild, I mean, this is nature. You just don't know what's going to be given to you. And, you know, if, like, for instance, when I was talking about that short-eared owl shot, what was given to me was an owl on a perch in a wide open space with some marsh grasses. That pretty much, from my perspective, calls for a literal shot, a literal shot that you can focus on fine feather detail. You can focus on the expression of the bird and go more toward a standard portrait. The great blue heron, there was a lot more there that I could play around with. So sometimes you just have to work with what you have. And in certain situations, I mean, when we were just talking about doing something impressionistic or abstract. Well, I mean, if you went to a local lake or pond and you had some mute swans or some things and they were moving around slowly, you can play around with shutter, light. So there's just all different varying degrees. You just have to be comfortable. And even if, I would say to the people listening, even if you're not comfortable, that's okay. Experiment with it. Just have fun with it. Don't push yourself to have an expectation of, wow, I really need to come away with something that's, quote, artistic. Enjoy it, you know, have fun with it and just go with your gut. And then as you learn, you'll experiment more.
Yeah. And I think when you're faced with a subject that you haven't photographed before, or said in a location you haven't photographed before, you know, the default position generally is to the more literal side of things, because you kind of want those banker shots. It's almost like you're recording a memory of that, you know, that situation, that species, that, you know, that location, and you want those first. And I think, you know, there's a lot to be said for that. But I think once you've got those, you know, my journey or my process through that would be to look at, you know, the more creative. I mean, I've never been to Africa before and never photographed lions. So, and, you know, and part of the big five. So, you know, if I were to do that, I know that my first go at that would be from a literal perspective. I know it would, but then my images are just in with everybody else's, because everybody goes there, everybody photographs the same individuals.
Yeah.
they're well known, elephants in particular. I mean, they've all got names, right? And, everybody knows, what they're looking at, and they've been done and done and done and done and done. But then when you add in these sort of creative elements, and then you can create a shot that actually stands out. Someone was showing me shots of lions yesterday, in fact. And what they'd done is they started with it was a lioness, and she was sat on top of like this grassy hummock, and it was, so the separation, foreground, background separation, it was nice. The light was really good. So, that scene lended itself, well, certainly initially, to that sort of literal approach, because you want to show the nice light. You want to show it's actually sitting in a nice position where you can, juggle all those elements to create a nice composition, and and all you're doing is focusing on the lioness. So that's great. But then what they'd done is that they'd gone through overexposure, so then and tighter, and then cropped in tighter to the head. So then you're getting more of a creative type effect. So you're not, there's still the literal elements of it, but you're not showing as much detail. And so there's more concentration on the darker elements of that, the features. So the eyes and the ears and around the muzzle, that sort of thing. Those were the areas that were drawing your eye more quickly, I think, and they were more dominant, because the rest of the scene, the overexposure, had washed out a lot of those distracting or more distracting elements. So then you're focused in, and it changes the nature of what you're looking at significantly. So one is this is what I saw. The next is, this is what I want you to see. This is what I want to put on my wall. And the two things are very, very different. From my own perspective, I know where my photography is going, and it is pushing those creative boundaries, because that's what I want to show people. That's what I want to see myself, because I want pictures that I would be happy to put on the wall. That's my standard thing. Or photographs where I'm showing somebody. I like it when people turn around to me and said, "How the hell did you shoot that?
Yeah.
How did you get that effect?" That's the pleasing thing for me. And then you can tell them, and you can share your process with somebody to inspire them to go out and try it for themselves. And they may take that germ of an idea that I've given them, because I steal ideas off other people all the time, because this is the whole iterative process of creative photography, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I want somebody to take something from me and then make it their own, and then do their own thing, and then move it on from there, or incorporate it with another technique. I mean, you incorporate high key with slow shutter, for example. Not many people do that.
Yeah.
And
they normally come together pretty well on that, Rob, because when you're pushing your exposure, your shutter's typically a little slower, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Combination.
Yeah. Unless you're really stressing your ISO out, which actually I do all the time now. I mean, I've got no problem with that. I don't even run noise reduction anymore. Rarely will I run noise reduction on stuff, unless my image is just loaded with dark and mid-tones and it's super, super noisy and I don't care for the grain in the shot. I'll run it, but rarely am I even running it. It's funny. You were just talking about that lioness, the high key shot. High key photography is so interesting to me because it kind of reverses the concept of brightness. Most people think that, well, traditionally so, your subject should be, the eyes or the face should be the brightest thing in the frame, and everything else with the vignette is rendered a little bit darker, so you lead your eyes to the subject. High key is just the opposite, right? Everything around it's bright, but it just has the reverse effect, and the focus is on your midtones and your darks. I've been taking so many high key shots because in the wintertime, it's typically cloudy. Here, sometimes there's snow on the ground, and it just lends itself to that. I mean, I feel like 90% of what I'm shooting is high key in the wintertime, but it's great. It's fun. But it's perfect. I mean, UK, we get a lot of cloud.
Yes, that's true.
And yeah, I mean, when you get the sun in the winter, it's amazing. You can get some really good light. I said when I was in Wales and I was shooting those sandworms, backlit, their tubes. I mean, it wasn't the worm itself; it was the tubes they were making. That was the perfect thing. I mean, you couldn't do that on a dull day, not the way I did it, because I wanted to use that backlight. I got loads of bokeh from the light reflecting on the sand particles, the wet sand
Yeah.
particles. So you could, shallow depth of field, you open the aperture up and, all the usual stuff. You can get these really nice effects, but you couldn't do that on a dull day.
Yeah.
And so we get plenty of those. So yeah, high key is perfect, particularly with birds. It just works so well with birds.
I agree. There's an elegance to it. I think it creates a sense of elegance in the image that I don't think you typically get with low key. Low key, there's more drama. There's more.
Yeah. There's
a sense
really
of
way of putting
elegance
it.
with high key photography. It's funny too. I'm thinking about the light in the wintertime. I don't know why. I mean, inquiring minds would like to know. If somebody knows, please tell me. But I've watched, because I've got a Western exposure at my house. So I watch sunsets, I watch sunrises sometimes, but mostly sunsets. The light quality in the winter has a more, how could I say it? There's a more pastel feel to it. I see more pinks. I see more light blues. Whereas in the summertime, the reds are just deeper. There's more deeper reds and yellows. And maybe that just has to do with how thick the atmosphere is, where the sun is setting relative. I don't know. But I always felt the sunsets in the wintertime more pastel. That's the only way I could.
It has something to do with sort of atmospheric temperature.
Perhaps, maybe that's the reason. Density in the atmosphere, temperature. I'm sure
more
there's
moisture in the air, perhaps, or something like that.
Yeah. But it's very pretty. And one thing I like about, well, two things I like about winter photography. I don't like to bundle up. I hate to go out. I don't mind the cold, but I don't like shooting with all these layers on. It just prohibits movement and freedom of movement. But there's a few advantages. One, you don't have to get up super, super early. Two, you could start shooting at 2:00 in the afternoon if it's sunny out, because the sun it's lower on the horizon, and you don't have to worry about ticks and bugs and certain things. So there are some benefits to it. But yeah, going back to shooting something that's creative and innovative versus getting that literal shot, I think a lot of it, Rob, has to do with what you're feeling at that point in time, what you're being handed to you in terms of what the scene is, and frankly, what you want to do. Shooting a literal image is not a bad thing, right? And I don't want people to think, as we're talking about, because certainly what gets our creative juices flowing is being creative in the field, right? But that isn't the case for most photographers. Actually, I would say we're in the minority. If you look at wildlife photographers across the globe, the majority of them want to capture a unique behavioral moment or come across a rare animal, or an animal that isn't seen a lot. That's why I think there's always such a drive toward owls, at least in the bird photography community, because they're not seen as much as diurnal birds. So it's not a bad thing if you want to shoot those literal shots. As a matter of fact, most people do. It's just a matter of, doing what you feel right. I find that when I'm trying to force something in the field, it never comes out right. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
You have to be bold to a certain extent, though, too. You need to be able to fail. We all need to fail. You should be able to experiment and do things and get out of your comfort zone, but do it when you feel it's right.
That's a really good point, actually. When you are pushing creative boundaries, and I think the other part of the question was the pressure on, the creative process. You are going to fail more often than you succeed. But the thing is, with the failures, you're learning something, because if something doesn't work, there's always a reason why. And then you can go back and you go, okay, that didn't work because actually I needed to slow the shutter down a little more, perhaps, than to get the effect that I wanted. So, it's I go back to this point. It's always an iterative process with things. I don't have an idea generally about trying to shoot something a bit differently and it works straight off the bat. It won't do that generally. I'll take it back, put it on the computer and go, okay, that's not a bad place to start. But if I changed this, and this, then actually I could probably improve the result, because I can see what I've done, and I can see how it's starting to change what I'm seeing. And if I'm a bit bolder, and generally it is being a bit bolder with something, so it is like increasing the shutter speed a little bit, or or decreasing the shutter speed a bit more, to give it a bit more time, or it's
Mm.
maybe I need to overexpose a little bit more and go, or underexpose a little bit more, and then render something almost as like a little, if it's backlit and rim lighting, just as an outline and everything else is black. It's just, I like it. I mean, this is where I think mirrorless has just been such a revelation for me. It's just because you can see when you're talking about exposure, you can see the effect that it's happened, that it's giving you, through the viewfinder. I mean, you can't see what you're going to get through the slow shutter aspect of things. I mean, that's always a surprise, and that's why I love slow shutter so much, because you never know what you're going to get, and you can never replicate the same shot twice. It's
No.
just, everything is unique, and I love the unpredictability of that. And I think the whole creative process, actually, it's the unpredictability of it that's so enticing to me, and it's so exciting. Whereas with a literal shot, if you get the exposure right and your shutter speed correct and everything else, you know what's coming out of it at the end of the day. And as I said, there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you enjoy. And I enjoy doing that in certain situations as well.
The definition of success for those shots is actually finding and coming across that moment in the field, versus on the artistic side or the creative side, if you want an innovative shot, it's actually creating the exposure itself. It's how you handle the camera. It's how you expose. So it's where you're placing the emphasis. Is the emphasis on, I need to find something that I think is rare and unique, and I want to get myself in the field to photograph it? Or is it, how do I create something that's different? How do I, with this moment that's in front of me, right? Which is, a common maybe, moment, or maybe it's just a situation that most people come across, but how do you see it differently and create something that's unique? So yeah, it's amazing when you think about the different mindsets in the field. And I will say, we've talked a little bit about this, Rob, in past podcasts from what I recall, but the iteration doesn't stop in the field. It continues on even in post-processing. One of the most challenging things I come across after I get a shot that I like, and I cull and I identify it, and like, okay, I'm going to process this. And because we're shooting wildlife and we're wildlife photographers, we don't always have the luxury to compose the shot in the scene, in the field, like a landscape photographer would. We have to crop, right? And in many cases, we have to crop to level out the scene, crop in, just because animals are moving and we're capturing them and we don't have that luxury. So the actual crop itself, I, in many cases, have ruined incredible images that I've taken due to the crop in hindsight. Or I've improved shots that are, but I came up with a creative crop that makes it stand out. So when you're cropping your image and when you're processing it, you can still, I should say, at least with the crop, very much so, you can be creative with a crop. And a lot of people don't put so much. People just, let me just put the bird in the rule of thirds and boom. But
no, I agree entirely, because you can change the whole emphasis of an image with a crop.
Yes, absolutely.
And this is where the literal side of things, it's more straightforward when you're photographing something literally. The choice of crop, the choice of all the other post-production techniques that we want to employ to bring out the best of an image is more obvious. I think when you're looking at something more creative, you have a bit more of the hand is a bit freer, I think, and what you do with that image, what you choose to do with that image, can make a dramatic difference, I think, much more so than a literal shot.
And you're taking more advantage of your gear too. I mean, if you're being creative, and people who I see who focus on innovation or focus on creative imagery, they're using their whole gear set. I mean, all their lenses. They're using 24 to 105, 70 to 200s. They're using 100 to 500s, 100 to 400. I'm speaking in Canon speak, of course, 180 to 600s, right? Or more so than just somebody going out with a super telephoto and only shooting with that. So you take good advantage of your gear to a certain extent as well when you're being innovative. But again, being literal is fine. It's just a matter of.
And I think if you're going to be creative, I think knowing your gear and what it's capable of is so important as well. I mean, that's why and actually I think being creative, the more simple you can make things, the more creative you get, which is why I've stripped my kit right down, because I don't like carrying loads of stuff around. I don't like too many choices. I want to be able to concentrate on macro, or a 24 to 120, or a 180 to 600. I want to be able to concentrate on one of those lenses, not keep swapping things around all the time, because I find that if I'm concentrating in one area, then I actually get more creative. So the more simple I make things, the more creative I tend to be. And I think that's an important point.
And it helps you keep an open mind, Rob. I mean, I was telling Scott when we were shooting yesterday, we were driving around this wildlife drive and we came across an opportunity. I forget exactly what it was, but I'm like, oh, if only this bird were here and I could see it, I could picture the shot. But and we all do this, right? We come across something that's 90% there, but it's not 100% yet. And you're like, okay, I see the shot that I want to get. If I will it in my mind, or I do certain things, I'm going to be able to make this shot. But it puts blinders on your perspective. And, the whole time you're shooting, you're thinking about, how do I get that shot that I just envisioned in my head? And you're not thinking about, well, I just came across, this deer over here, or this bird, and what can I do with that? It's a tricky thing how your mind works, right? I try not to get too obsessive with a situation if I see it and say, okay, this is the shot I want. Because if you get too obsessive, the blinders go on and it shuts your mind down to other opportunities and being able to kind of innovate and roll with the punches in the field.
You saying that, I was just thinking about, when I went to Norfolk, and having those, the mud flats there, and the first evening we got there, the sun was going down directly opposite us, and we were getting this very monochromatic sort of light reflecting off of those expansive mud flats, and we had all these pools and channels and this, that, and the other, making really nice shapes with the shadows and the light reflecting from the setting sun. And I just sat there thinking, I just want a bird there. It would be perfect. I can see the scene. So exactly, you're trying to fit. So rather than actually looking at what you had in front of you and saying, well, I haven't got a bird there, but I have got this group of birds over here. What can I do with that? Or so, yeah, you do get focused on something where you can see the ideal shot. Versus, really what you should be doing is concentrating on what you can take, and not, hoping that ideal moment is going to happen, because rarely it does.
You're right. And social media does that too, because matter of fact, I was just posting images in it's one of these Facebook group photography things, and you'll post an image for a location and people will say, what time of day did you get that? And where was it? And I think what it does, and I've done this too in the past. I see an image, I'm like, oh, that's a great image. And then I'm like, I'd like to do something like that. And then you're just focused on that. You go to that location, you're trying to replicate something that somebody's done, or it went viral on social media, or you liked it and whatnot. It's a tough thing. You have to kind of break away from that and not fall into that trap, because it'll restrict you.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I think, is looking at other people's work and trying to replicate it is all well and good. But I think it's better to take ideas and then try and transpose those onto scenes that you've got in front of you, and build a repertoire of your own techniques, because that's where you learn, rather than, and I think with literal images, it's very easy to replicate, or is it much easier to replicate what somebody else has done, perhaps? Whereas with more creative images, I think that's more difficult. I mean, particularly when we're talking about slow shutter stuff, you can never replicate.
I agree.
A Yuri shot, for example, because every one of those is unique. And
I 100% agree,
Rob. You can use the technique. You can apply the technique, or you can apply your own spin on that technique in other areas and create your own Yuri image. And I think that's what makes creative photography so compelling, for me at least.
The hardest thing, I think, for any wildlife photographer listening out there, and I think everybody would share this sentiment, is finding your own voice and creating your own style. That's so difficult to do. I personally find that if I'm looking at photographers who shoot literal, or they shoot mostly literal, what defines them, and it's hard to be more distinct when you're shooting literal. Let's be honest, it just is. It's how they process images, the way they post-process, the way they do certain things. It helps those images stand out, or you could see a certain style on how somebody views things as they're moving the toggles around and how they process these images, but much harder to stand out with your own voice in the literal world. In the creative world, and when you're shooting things that, are outside of the box, I think it's easier to create your own voice and create your own style, because it's just a much wider breadth of what you're playing around with in terms of the exposures and the crops and all these other things that you introduce. But finding your own voice and creating your own style, it's really what brings you to the next level. And my styles have changed over the years. I'm sure yours have, and maybe I haven't even found my style yet. We're all our own worst critics.
Well, I don't think I've found mine. I mean, my brain's fairly chaotic. I mean, it's doing one thing over here, another thing over there, and I've got all these ideas competing with with themselves. And that's my particular problem. I think squirrels in your brain, mad squirrels in your brain. That's what my head is. I've always got new ideas. I'm always thinking of new things. I mean, particularly when you perhaps got another creative photographer that you're bouncing ideas off of. That's when the most, I think, that's when I think the most innovative stuff comes through. It's rather like, when you put a set of musicians together, so say you've got you've got Paul McCartney and John Lennon together, they will be more creative as a partnership than they would be.
Don't be dissing on Wings, Rob. Don't be dissing on Wings. I mean,
no, I'm not dissing Wings.
Saying,
most people would say that the Beatles were more creative than Wings.
You're right about that. Yeah.
I don't think they argue with you, but you know what I mean. It's like when you've got two people that bounce off ideas off each other, that creativity, that opens up, a much sort of larger creativity or creative door than on your own, or the process is swifter, I think, from getting you from A to B.
Yeah, I agree. And shooting with, and I'll use another kind of go down the musical analogy, which I think is great because I love this stuff. And when you shoot with different photographers and associate with different photographers, what you can create becomes different. I mean, I could look at AC/DC, right? Bon Scott to Brian Johnson, Van Halen. You had David Lee Roth to Sammy Hagar. All great sounds, and the bands were great in those different stages. Black Sabbath, Ozzy, Dio, right? But so it just depends on what that dynamic is around you. And the creativity can change, and it can take different shapes and forms, so that's always interesting too.
Well, I think that's why musicians collaborate with other musicians and other bands, don't they? Because then, if you're getting a little stale, then you get an influence in from somebody else, or they use a different instrument, or they use, introduce, I don't know, go for a blend of, I mean, if you look at something like, I mean, we start talking about music now, but if you look at something like Metallica, who are fairly extreme, heavy rock band,
completely overrated though, right, Rob? I mean, in hindsight, great, most highest selling metal band of all time, but I always thought these guys were overrated. After Injustice,
I don't know. I mean, when you look at their musical compositions, I think it's incredible. And they've done collaborations with orchestras.
Yeah,
they did it with San Diego Philharmonic, didn't they? And
I have that album actually.
Yeah, and actually, when you blend those two things together, it creates something pretty, and you actually realize those two genres aren't too far apart, really.
I agree. Metal and
are very similar. They're delivered in a different way, and I think it's the same with photography. If you can have two people that the styles might be, like on paper, look very, very different. You'll find that the creative process is probably very similar, and the way they work, but melding those two things together, I think it expands ideas, and and I love this groundbreaking stuff.
Yeah,
I love it.
No, I completely agree. I think, and it's not that you should choose your company, but I think the company that you're in and the people that you associate with and the photographers you associate with, it has a huge impact. It really does. I mean, we're social animals, we're social creatures, right? I mean, we're part of a community, so. If we're around people who shoot more literally, and we're going to be inspired by that. Or if we're around people who shoot more innovative from, more creative standpoint, we're going to be inspired
Because
by that.
you're exposed to it, aren't
Absolutely.
you? I mean, it's like you go into a camera club, okay, and most camera clubs fairly straight laced in terms of the way they look at photography, fairly literal. Everything is sharp focus that needs to be
Yep.
exposure correct, blah blah blah. And if your influence is that, then there's no surprise that your photography is going to take a literal path, and it's going to look pretty similar to a lot of other people's photography. And there is nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticizing that one bit, because at the end of the day, I think photography for me is just a way to enjoy the natural world, and it's an outlet. And for me, it's an outlet for my creativity. For other
Yeah.
people, it's an outlet. It's just a pastime. It improves their mental health. It takes them outside. If you're a nature photographer, for example, it doesn't really matter how you photograph it. I think if the important thing is being out there and enjoying it. But for me, going down that creative path and pushing boundaries and trying to take something different, that just adds to that enjoyment of nature. And it's
Yeah. I'm going down the musical thing because, that's where my head is right now. But I'm thinking about, like, if you want to be literal and go out and get that solid shot, I'm thinking like Kiss would be a good example of that. Something straightforward and boom. But if you want to be more experimental, and you want to listen to something different, then put some Pink Floyd on, right?
yeah, no,
Put
well,
on Wish You Were Here or The Wall, right? I mean,
exactly. Every album's different. I mean,
Yeah.
the literal stuff, AC/DC, right? Great band, but they've made the same album. What is it? I don't know, 16 times or whatever. But I still love their music, and but you know what to expect, and that's the literal photograph. You know what's coming. Whereas with something like Pink Floyd, you buy, and I'm not there producing music anymore, but you put an album on and you never knew what you were going to get. It was that element of surprise, and that's why I think the element of surprise over the element of predictability, both of which are enjoyable, but in different ways. And I think that's a really good analogy, actually.
Yeah, and in the literal world, the element of surprise is typically the subject. What's the animal that's being found,
Or the behavior,
or the behavior, versus on the innovative side, that doesn't really matter. It's what the composition is, or what's being incorporated into it. The subject matters less versus in the literal side. So no, I think, and using these musical analogies, I think it makes a lot of sense as we're talking about that. I hate to diss Metallica. They have innovated over the years, and they do have different sounds. I saw them years ago with Queensryche, and Queensryche was so much better. That's just the band that I've always. But anyhow, yeah. So I digress on Metallica.
Well, I've never seen Metallica live. It's one of the things that I need to tick off my list, actually. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll play for. And most of these bands have stopped playing, but they'll probably stick around for.
Oh yeah, they've still got some miles left on the clock. That's for sure. Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
No, it's an interesting discussion, and I mean, I know for me that it is the creativity that drives my passions, I think, for photography, because I just don't ever like staying in one place too long. And I think from a literal perspective, that's where I would find I would go a bit stale, because what you're looking for there is different situations, different birds, different behaviors to photograph. With a creative approach, you can photograph the same bird, but find 1,000 ways of doing it.
Yeah.
And the challenge of that for me, I think, is greater than wanting to go to so many more different places and photograph so many more different species in different ways or whatever. I think, the creativity challenge for me is I'd love to do all those things. I mean, who doesn't like seeing a new bird? Who doesn't like going to a new place? But I think, the real draw for me is how to photograph something differently.
We talked. I'll tie this to another podcast we had recently, FOMO, fear of missing out, right?
Very similar. Yeah.
The FOMO for me has gone down. The more I think you shoot creative, the more ambivalent you are about your subject matter and you're just trying to create something unique and
Correct.
new and you're not chasing
Yeah.
something, your FOMO level goes down. For the literal shooters, and I know this, I was a literal shooter, I still am, but somebody says, "Oh wow, Josh, we came across a long-eared owl 40, about 40 minutes from here, and it was incredible, and everybody was there." And then you step on the gas and you want to get that owl, and you're up, the owl's gone. Oh my God, right? The shoot's done. So,
Well,
you know,
your short-eared owl takes off before you get a shot of it.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
right? So the FOMO element isn't there as much on the innovative, creative side, which I think has helped. It's lowered my anxiety level of expectations in the field. So I don't know, just something to think about too, as we were talking about. It just kind of hit me. The light bulb went on as we were talking because we just
Yeah.
spoke about FOMO.
Do you when you look at taking things a step further or trying to do something you've never done before, how does that sort of new technique or that new approach come about for you? Do you think about, is it a conscious thought, or is it something that just develops at the time, or do you know what I mean? Is it just strike you at the time, or is it, something you've worked on for a while?
It's
Yeah.
conscious, but it's always perspective. I mean, honestly, if I'm doing something that I think is unique in the field or I have done in the past, Rob, it's probably been done before and I just didn't even know about it, right? So it all comes down to your perspective and what you're doing. At least I thought at the time, okay, well, I'm going to do something that's a bit different. A couple years ago, or I would say this was already some time ago, I worked on some wide angle shots of songbirds. And most songbird shots are super telephoto, bird on the stick singing and whatnot. So I figured, all right, let's see what I can do. Let's see if I can have a wide, but
Yeah, I
you
remember
have to
some of
get
those.
close. So I was doing some camera traps and experimenting with that. Now, I maybe have talked about this one photographer, Elliot Porter. I have some of his books. I mean, he was doing this stuff 70 years ago to a certain extent. Now, it would cross ethical boundaries today. He wouldn't be able to get away with it. But back then, during that time in the 30s and 40s, this guy was doing it because he was like, well, he was shooting nests. I don't do that, right? So I don't even get anywhere near a nest. But he was shooting them in a wide perspective. You could see the environment, and the bird, and everything else. In my case, I was not doing that because that's a bridge too far for me. I wouldn't do it. But yeah, I thought it was unique. I thought it was different, but I thought a lot about it, right? It was conscious, and I had to do planning. I had to do setups. I had to compose in the field and get everything set up, the remote triggers and all that business. So yeah, but as it turns out, maybe it wasn't as unique as I thought. But in this current environment and what you're seeing, people saw it as unique. I took a shot a couple years ago. What was it? It was a Blackburnian warbler, and it was a wider shot with like some spruce trees around it. And I think
I remember that image. Yeah.
yeah. And one of the highest compliments that I think you can get from a fellow photographer is, "Hey, Josh, I saw this image. I thought it was really unique, and it inspired me to try something new." I'd much rather get that versus
love that. Yeah. Yeah.
much more than, "Oh, I really like that image. It's beautiful and very pretty. Good job." I prefer the former over the latter. Yeah.
Do you think inspiring people to do something that gives me such a rush?
Yeah.
As you're saying, oh, I like that image. It's just another like. Well, yeah, okay. What do you like about it? They never really expand upon why they like it. If you inspire people to try something, and it could be through sharing something on social media, or it could be while you're doing something out in the field. Again, go back to Norfolk. We bumped into this other woman and started chatting to her, and just before the flocks are taking off from the wash as the tide's coming in, and inspired her to start doing slow shutter, for example.
Yeah.
And then I'm getting messages from her later on, days and days later, saying, "I'm still doing it, blah, blah, blah. It's really good," and then you're thinking, wow, you've opened somebody's mind to a creative process that they hadn't considered doing before. And that's, that's so rewarding.
Yeah, because you're sharing knowledge. And there's two types of people out there. I'm going to give an opinion. Disclaimer, here comes Josh's opinion. But there's two types of people out there. There's people who want to share knowledge and want to pass on the joy as much as
I
possible in
know what
terms
you're
of
going to
what they've
say.
learned and discovered, versus the I'm going to keep everything to myself. I'm
Yeah.
going to hide everything. And I just want I want to be unique. And if I share anything, I'm not going to be unique anymore. I need to protect it's like a copyright patent lawyer approach. And in my opinion, that's not the right way to go. I think the people who share, it always comes back. It just is. Maybe it's karmic.
Should I
Maybe it's
tell you? Should I tell you something? I think you can tell people what you do and how you get shots. It really doesn't matter, because they're not going to take the same things as you, even when you've told them how you do it. It's like,
not your grandmother's marinara recipe.
right.
That's
Okay. Let's go back to the musical analogy. John
yeah,
Lennon, right, can teach you the chords on the guitar. There you go. They're the
yeah,
chords that I use to play that song. He's put
yeah.
them together in a way that you can't do, because his creative brain is, has organized it in a different way, and his experience has taught him that, I can do things in it, and nobody can really replicate it. It's the same with photography to a degree. You can tell people, or you can explain to people how you've taken a shot, but they'll never replicate it. I don't think down the creative, not identically, not when you've shot something creatively. Literally, you're going to get pretty close, right? And actually, it's not going to be too difficult to teach somebody over a much shorter period of time how to replicate a shot that you've taken in a literal sense. Creativity, you're talking about, creative, then I don't think people are going to understand those processes very, in exactly the same, or interpret them in exactly the same way, and they'll get different results. And I think that's quite exciting, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's always important to share and not come off. Now, when I say share, I'm talking about photography techniques and whatnot. I'm not talking about, if you see a rare bird, here's the GPS location. I'm not talking about sharing locations. I'm talking about just sharing knowledge about photography.
Yeah, absolutely. But as you say, or you share a recipe for something, give it to 10 people, and you'll get 10 different results. It's exactly the same thing. You'll follow the same recipe, but the results will be different. Because
it's fun to see that too. If everybody sees things differently. You could be standing right next to somebody taking the same shot, and those images are going to look different. And I think that's great.
And we've done that, haven't we? We've done that with friends and people that we know. And then you look on the back of everybody's camera, and then, there might be some, fairly short shrift comments going back, because you've got a decent shot that they haven't got, or you've seen it in a slightly different way. It's so good. And this is why shooting with other people, we're going back to another conversation we've had, shooting with other people actually can be really rewarding, and it can move your photography on, or move that creative process on.
And it's all about sharing. I think if you're shooting with other people, and I do this all the time, I'll share compositions. I'll share the back of my camera. Oh, here's what I'm coming up with. This is kind of what I see and whatnot. That's much more valuable than, hey, what's your ISO? What's your shutter over there? I mean, the EXIF data, we've talked about that a lot.
Yeah, it makes me laugh. It's like people are so focused on what settings did you use to get that shot.
Yeah.
Well, it's not it's not necessarily the settings that have. Of course, it's the combination of settings that have got the shot, but that's not the secret sauce, is it? Really, to a lot of these creative things, it's not the settings; it's the application of those settings to the circumstance that you've been presented with. And I think that's the key, because you're not going to use the settings I've used to take one picture, take it to a different location with a different subject, and get a similar result, because the circumstances are different, the light levels are different. It's it's nonsense, really, when you start talking about these things.
And going back to that short-eared owl image I started with, Rob, if somebody looked at the settings on that short-eared owl image I took, they'd criticize them, and rightly so. I had my ISO at 6400 because I wanted to jack my shutter up a little bit, because in case it flew. So if it decided to fly, I wanted to have a fast enough shutter to catch it in flight, or get it, jumping off of the perch. But if you look at that image and not even consider that, you're like, Josh, you should have brought your ISO way down, and you'd have a lot, So
why?
Even that isn't,
but people get so obsessed with ISO.
I know.
I'll bring it down. We're not in the days of the early digital revolution now, where anything over 400 is going to get really noisy. I mean, I use 10,000, 20,000 ISO, particularly for high key, all the time, and I'm
Oh, me
happy
too.
to do so. Happy to
If
do.
it looks and feels right, it's right. That's the way
Yeah.
I say it. I mean, I find that if people take a very photographers who really get into gear and really get into all these specs and get into, the camera reviews and the ISO performance is one stop better on this and this was added and this, I find they typically go down into the more literal route, right? They're out there, they're appreciating the technical performance of the camera in terms of what it can do in the field, just as much as they appreciate getting an image. So I find, and it's not a criticism, I just find that they're more typically literal photographers, people who get
Because
into.
they're technical.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Those technical qualities matter to them because they want the best result they can get, because they're comparing images they've taken in the past with images they're taking now of the same subjects taken in the same way.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to be doing that.
Yeah.
I want to, the subjects might be the same, but I want to be taking them in different ways. And that to me is the difference between the two approaches. And I said nothing wrong with either, because photography is just there to be enjoyed. I
agree.
don't care if you're a technical, literal photographer or a creative photographer. If you're enjoying it, that's what photography is there for. But my route isn't the technical side of things. I've used my the skills I've developed over taking technical images to help my creative side, and that's the way I look at it.
They can both complement each other. I hate to generalize, but I most of the people that I've come across over the years, and this is just my experience, I could be wrong, this is anecdotal, but if I come across somebody in the field over the years that is a retired engineer or someone who comes out of a technical profession, chances are they're going to be a bit more literal. The more artistic shooters that I've seen over the years, they're typically graphic artists or painter. They come more from, so it's interesting. That's not always the case. It's not a one size fits all, and it's easy to cross over those boundaries. But my own experience, I found that people who are more literal or more, they gravitate more toward the technical aspects of photography. They've come from those types of professions.
They're more analytical.
Yeah.
Rather than,
it's interesting. But like it's a generalization. I could be totally, somebody could say, Josh, you're full of crap, and they might be right. Just my own experience. Yeah,
but I think, when you talk about creative people in general, they've moved away from that sort of technical analytical brain. They don't have that type of brain, generally speaking. It's more, I hate to use the word chaotic, but from my perspective, I know that my brain is more chaotic than perhaps more someone who's more analytical, because it just doesn't work that way. Not for me. And I think that's where my passion for it's my creative outlet. I can't draw, I can't paint, I can write, and but photography for me, in terms of a visual outlet, is the only one I've got.
I like visuals. I'm the same as you. I will say there are some analytical pieces to a creative image, like that creating order out of chaos, right? So I'll go back to that great blue heron shot I was talking about. And again, I know
photography, for example.
Figuring out, what trees are incorporated, what branches swoop out of the corner of the frame, all that stuff. So creating that order out of that's, to me, that where you need to have a bit of an analytical mind versus
there's an element of precision you need with that.
So it's a combination sometimes of things, I guess. But
no, I mean, I get it, which is,
it's always a yin and yang, right?
but it depends on how your brain's organized. I mean, if you've got an analytical side to your brain, as I think you have, then you're going to do those sorts of things much better than I would ever do, because I think you just have a brain that pieces those things together in a much more logical way than I would. And I think that's why then you gravitate towards that type of image, because you see it, whereas I wouldn't necessarily see it. I see it from your images, and I look at your images and I go, okay, if I'm presented with something similar, I can see how you've arrived at that. but I still haven't got the same brain as you to be able to piece those pieces of the jigsaw together the way that you do. But I think that's the brilliant thing about, you know, this sort of creative process, because
there's no rules.
Well, there's no rules, but there's so many different ways you can look at it, and there's so many different ways you can put those elements together. Whereas if you're looking at a tight literal shot, you know, if we're taking that short-eared owl, okay, filling the frame with it, we're going to be taking similar shots, okay, in that situation, because exposure is going to be similar, the composition is going to be similar, but the heron, we would come away with completely different images from that, because of the situation and because of the way we interpret it.
Yep, we may not even be in the same ballpark. You're right,
and that is where that's what I love. I love the way that people come away with something different, because it's getting back to that element of the unexpected again, or the unpredictable. Do you know what I mean? It's
absolutely,
and that's what really makes me tick, as people could probably tell. Because if I get excited, I tend to talk faster. And
I'm the same way, by the way. This is a fun topic too. It is fun.
It is. So what's next for you creatively?
You know, I would say that just getting out there more. I mean, I've been shooting a ton this winter, which is great. I don't normally shoot a lot in the wintertime. I don't know why, but I should shoot more.
You should.
So I'm going to definitely get out this upcoming weekend and shoot. So I'm excited, just hoping for just more of the same in the way of subjects, and figuring out different ways to compose and come up with things that are unique. I can tell you, Rob, there's a lot more high key in the future for me, because this is just the time to do that, you know. And I love
it. It's like slow shutter. It's just, you know, it just gets addictive, that actually when you start.
Yeah. How about you, Rob?
Oh, I don't know really. I mean, probably. I mean, I'm in love with my water birds, as everybody knows. But I think I want to, excuse me, try photographing things outside of the sort of bird arena, if you like. I think that's what I like to do. I like to do more woodland stuff, you know, and just explore perhaps a bit more macro. That, you know, at a different time of year, because I mean, macro is all about sort of spring, summer, and autumn, really, isn't it? But winter, that could be quite interesting, I think, and introducing perhaps some of the techniques that I use for birds into those macro things, and maybe, you know, some more sort of almost sort of static subjects, but trying to photograph them in a different way. So I think, that's probably where the next challenge for me is. I mean, I'll always photograph birds. I mean, obviously this is the time to try and find owls, really. And I want to go and try and find, you know, try and make sure I see and photograph shorties before the winter's out. So I've failed miserably so far, but so that's another particular target. Whether I manage it or not is another issue. So I guess those sorts of things. But I just getting out with a camera and just being prepared to photograph what I come across, rather than specifically targeting a species or one particular type of shot. Do you know what I mean? It's just trying to make the most of whatever's in front of me, and I think that helps the creative process, because you need to think.
Absolutely.
So that's where I think I'm going.
Cool. Well, this has been great, Rob. This has been fun. Good conversation.
I love this sort of conversation. I love it, because I hope people get something from it. And I think the message for me really about it is, it doesn't matter what you do with photography. Photography's there to enjoy it, and whatever you want to, however you want to enjoy it, just don't worry about what people think. Don't worry about, I only shoot literal, I only shoot creative, or if you do shoot creative, don't worry about being completely bold and producing something wacky. Don't be worried about failing and just cocking everything up and coming away with nothing, because it's just a learning experience. Just enjoy it. Just enjoy the process, because we've only got one life, and that's where I think I'd leave it.
That's right. Well said.
Okay. Anyway, so I hope people enjoyed the discussion. I said I certainly enjoy it. I love this sort of stuff. And thanks again for everybody who's been buying us coffee. That's really appreciated. So thank you again for all the support there. And links in the description if you want to go down that road. If not, that's fine. But we're caffeine addicts, so never have enough coffee.
That's right.
And I guess next episode hopefully we'll have a guest. I think we're talking.
I think we got a couple people lined up, so it's going to be an exciting year for the podcast.
It is going to be an exciting year, and together with what we hinted at before, more over and above the podcast, something else coming. So, and we are going to be at Bird Fair this year in the UK, which is in July. I forget the exact dates, but it's mid-July. So if you're going to Bird Fair and if you're in the UK, then do make sure you come and say hello. We'll give more details in a future podcast once we know exactly where we're going to be, a Bird Fair, stand number, etc. But we will be there. Definitely me and you, Josh, and maybe somebody else too. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I can't wait.
Well, definitely somebody else too, but maybe tease people a bit more on that one. So anyway.
Sounds good.
Anyway, thanks everybody for listening. Hope you've enjoyed that, and we'll see you again next time.
Cheers.
You have been listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast. If you have enjoyed the content, then please help us to spread the word by sharing a link on your social media platforms, giving us a like, and leaving us a comment. See you all again next time.